And hello, everybody. Welcome to the Agentforce CodeLive. My name is Philippe Ozil. I'm a developer advocate, and it's been a while since I haven't been here, but I'm very, very glad to be back. Today, in this session, we'll be talking about testing Agentforce agents, and we're going to see the different tools that exist to help us do that. This is something I haven't done much in the past. I'll be honest. I've built a lot of agents, but I haven't spent enough time testing them. So I spent a couple of days preparing for this, and now I can give you a tour of all the different features and how this can be done. All right. So before I start, I just want to share my latest findings. I did make some recommendations in terms of documentation updates. So I have some important news to share regarding documentation updates, things that are not live yet, but will be updated in our documentation very soon. And that's precisely what I want to share today. So let me just hide my face so that you can see what I'm talking about. There are currently three different ways to write agent tests. And the first one is probably the most, the one we all know. That's the testing center. This is a user interface in Salesforce setup, which lets us specify tests. And the information that wasn't surfaced just before in documentation was that this option was limited to CSV file format. We'll see that just after, but I'll show you how you can define agent tests using CSV files. The other thing that is not clear in the documentation that needs to be updated is that we don't have support for custom evaluation criteria. This is something also I will demonstrate during today's session. Then there are two other formats, two other options to specify agent tests. There is the command line, or the so-called Agentforce DX CLI extension. This one uses YAML, so you'll see that there are different formats that are not really compatible between these different options, but they have some of them have more flexibility. The Agentforce DX is interesting because it does support custom evaluation criteria. So this is a way to provide more robustness to test, and we'll see that again later on. Finally, the most technical option is the testing API, and the testing API is in fact working both with Salesforce metadata. You'll see that there is a metadata type associated with agent tests, and working with some APIs like the metadata API and the connect API to run tests. This last format uses XML. It supports the full range of custom evaluation criteria. So this is the most flexible one. This is the one you can ship with your Salesforce DX projects, and I think that's the one we'll spend the most time on. So that's a little clarification that was needed before we really jump into the topic. That I can now talk more about what's coming up. So let me just go back, close my screen, and I'll share something else. I'll share in a second. I'll go back and present my org and explain a bit what we want to do today. Give me a sec. So I'm a bit rusty, as you can notice. It's been too long since I haven't presented those sessions. I'll try to remember all my shortcuts. All right, so we are now back online. We're looking at Coral Clouds. Coral Clouds is our fictitious sample app that we use to present everything that is Agentforce related. I can see there's already a question in chat from Niket about the GitHub for this. So I'll go ahead and I'll just go directly to the end, and I'll actually share the resources just right now so that you can all have it. Everything you need will be available under this short link. That's sforce.co/cl for codeLive -agent-testing. So I've included the links to the documentation, although pay attention because this will be updated soon. And there are all sorts of links under this short link. There is also a full trail mix, which includes link to the sample app, the Coral Cloud sample app with a GitHub repository. You can install it, and let me very quickly show you where you can get it. So if you go on GitHub, if you go search for, actually, I'm gonna get it from my shortcut here. You can get it directly from our Trailhead Apps repository, Coral Clouds. So this contains the full source code for all of the Core Cloud application, and you have setup instructions that are provided on how to install it. Everybody can install it. There are multiple options to install it. You can either use a the brand new developer edition, or you can even use scratch orgs, provided that you set up the right permissions in your dev hub. Today, I'll be using a scratch org, but again, there are multiple options. So this is how you can get what I'm doing. You can start from the sample app, and let me now present a bit more the sample app itself. So the sample app here is called Chlor Cloud, and it's a fictitious seaside resort that lets basically guests book some experiences. So we work mainly with the contact objects, which represent our different customers. We have some experiences, which are basically activities for people who want to go to the resort, and people can book for some experience sessions. So instances at a given time of an activity like tropical snorkeling, for example. So all of this can be then tied to booking, which ties together our contacts with the experience sessions. And then there are a couple other things, reviews for activities. There's also credits in case there's a dispute around booking or cancellation, or maybe even loyalty that needs to be rewarded. Now, around the Core Cloud sample app, we have two agents that we're going to work with. And these are here. We have an employee agent. That's the one we're going to test. And we have a service agent, which is surfaced on a Experience Cloud website. So let me paste the link in the chat. I can see some people are having a hard time to get it. So I'll just paste that in the chat. Get a second. There we go. I'll paste the short link with the resources in both chats. So this is for YouTube and this is for LinkedIn. There we go. So everyone has the short link. And let me also double check it just in case I made something stupid in terms of configuration. But normally this points out to a trail mix with all of the resources that are needed. A module that explains how to use the testing center, documentation for the various options that I described, the CLI with Agentforce DX, the documentation guide for the testing API, and the documentation for the testing center, along with the link to the Core Cloud app. So that's everything you'll need to reproduce basically what I'm doing in this session. All right, so moving back to my agents. I have two agents in there. We'll be starting to work with the employee agent. That's the one we're going to test. And I'm going to cover now the different options to test the agent. But before I actually go into testing the agent, I want to present a bit what it does. So I'm going to open the agent and we're going to take a look at the definition of the agent in Agentforce Builder. So this custom employee agent has one topic called Customer Service Assistant. It's actually used by Core Cloud employees to help basically customers that are asking for help. And there are a number of instructions here. I won't go into details in the instructions, but I want to highlight just a couple of actions that are packaged with this. There are a number of custom actions that we've wrapped into this employee agent. The first one is check weather. That allows us to basically check the weather at the resort. It's an Apex action that calls an external service. Oh, sorry, not an external service, an API to check the weather at a given location. There is an Apex action which allows us to generate a personalized schedule for a given employee. So basically, we have to specify for which customer we want to generate a personalized schedule, and then based on the customer preferences, we can ship a personalized schedule. Then there's a utility flow method, which allows us to retrieve a customer based on their email or membership number. These are information that we have added to our contact information. So for example, if I open our guest, Sofia Rodriguez, she has a membership number along with an email. So these are the two methods that allow us to identify a customer. Now, back into the definition, we also have two actions to issue resort credits. We'll get back to that later on, but there's a single flow for assigning credit to a single customer, and then there's another one to do this as a bulk operation. Finally, there are a couple of our standard actions: getting record details, summarizing record, and query record. These are agent out-of-the-box actions. We won't be looking at those too much, and also we won't be testing those because, yeah, they're mainly out of the box. So right now, what we're going to do is focus on the first 5 actions. These are the ones that are custom. These are the ones we want to test. So what's the point in testing those? Well, essentially, you can write all of your tests in the conversation preview. So for example, you can ask for the weather here, what's the weather for tomorrow, for example, and I can ask my agent this. Of course, this will probably work, but there are a number of iterations and variations in the way you can ask for this. So to be sure that it works consistently with various parameters, you want to automate those checks. You can't run all of this manually in Agent Builder. So that's why we have those agent tests, which can be run in a batch and can be reproduced with certain variations. There are different ways to access the testing center. The first one is here. You can get it with the batch test button here, or if you go out of this agent builder, you can also find it and set up under testing center here. I've already prepared one set of tests here. That's the one that I've tweaked a bit over time, but I'm going to show you how you can start from scratch. I see that there is already a question in the chat, so it's asking us about how we can get the core cloud result sample app. Well, that's using the resources that are currently being shared on the screen. I will, by the way, remove those. The link is also in the chat, so you can find it there. Let me hide the lower third so that it doesn't get in our way now. I think everybody had a chance to copy those. Let me get rid of that. Now, let me also go full screen because there are a lot of information in the testing center. And I will say one thing, you better have a pretty large monitor because there's a lot of information displayed. So it's more convenient to see in a large monitor. So what I'm going to do is before we look at the finalized test, I want to go and create a new one so that I can show you the different options that there are for creating a test. So first of all, you have to provide a name. So I'm just going to go with temp for now. I won't save it really. Then you specify which agent you want to test. For our first test, we're going to go with the employee agent. You can provide an optional description, and then the interesting part starts. Now, there are multiple ways to incorporate data in those tests. You can obviously write them in a isolated environment, like I'm doing right now in a sandbox, or sorry, in a Scratch org. You could also write them in a developer edition without the full history. But what's even better, if you have access to an org that has some live data, is to include the conversation history from all of the past interactions. That's very valuable because it will help the testing center basically analyze deviation and possible variations in the user queries. So you can basically write tests for the different use cases that your users have encountered with your agent. Now, since I'm in a Scratch org, I don't have any history. That's really a clean slate. And to answer the other question that landed in the chat, the testing center is available for all orgs. As long as you have an Agentforce license, you can have the testing center. Then moving on to the second option here, context variables. We don't have any context variable specifically defined in the employee agent, but if we were to test the service agent, we would have context variables, so we would be able to include them in our test. So I'm going to skip that for now, and I'm going to move to the final screen. Sorry, not the final screen, the penultimate screen, the one for selecting how we test data, how we generate test data. Oof, I'm gonna get it there. There are 3 options there. We can let the agent basically figure it out by itself. That's a very clean and fast way to start. It will take a look at the topic instructions, the action definition, the source code of the actions, and even our current records in the org. So this is very powerful. It's a good way to start. It lets you save a lot of time. You generally want to iterate once you start from this. So you can start with this one. That's my recommendation. If you have also a knowledge knowledge base connected to your agent, you can also use that to basically create tests based on knowledge articles. I don't have one in my case, so I'm going to use this one. The last option, if you've already done this a couple of times, you can upload a CSV file. You can really start from scratch. There is a template that is provided for you to work on, but it's fairly manual, and I wouldn't recommend to start really from scratch. What I recommend is going for this option, generating test cases based on topic and actions. Now, the configuration here is a bit particular. You have to specify a number of tests that are being generated, so that's up to you to figure out how many tests you want. I don't have a good recommendation, but basically you want to have a high number there, and you can lower the number of tests by removing them after when you tweak them. So let's go ahead and select the AI generation for test cases. Then we can specify which criteria we're going to select to evaluate. There are a number of optional things we need to do to evaluate the test results. There are a set of default evaluations, and there are custom, or say optional, response quality evaluation criteria. So let me go first through the ones that are the default and the standard ones. The first one is basically to check if the final text outcome of the agent, the agent answer, matches what we expect. So this is not a precise match. It's actually AI analyzing the response of the agent against an expected answer. So it's pretty flexible. That's pretty good because, as you probably know, agents are not known to be very stochastic. They tend to vary a bit in terms of not being very predictive, very stochastic. And they tend to vary a bit in terms of wording, in terms of punctuation. So you can do a precise match like you would do like an Apex test, for example. The other one is the topic assertion. Same thing, you have an expected topic and you have the actual topic that is being selected. So you want to make sure these two things match. Finally, the action selection is basically a list of actions that you expect the agent to take when it executes your prompt. The other criteria that are optional are completeness, coherence, conciseness, and latency. These are basically metrics that you go on to follow over time. It's generally a bit more, I would say, not as important as the default one, but you can make some extra analysis, especially if you include the conversation history. I think it's interesting. So let me go ahead and start to generate the test cases. We're now in the view of the testing center, and it's going to be working on generating those tests for us. All right, so let's just wait a couple minutes, or maybe not minutes, a couple seconds, and we should be seeing about 20 tests come up in this list here. It takes a bit of time to generate those because what's happening behind the scenes is what we're calling an LLM. It has access to our records, to our actions, to our metadata to figure out what are the best prompts to test the various scenarios for our actions. Now, I would say that this is a bit long, but normally we should get the status back soon. While I wait for this, let me go in the chats. I can see there are other questions in there, so let me try to see if I can answer. All right. Let's see. Is it possible to add custom evaluations for a test? So there's something called custom evaluation, but it's not exactly performance responsible AI metrics. You'll see that there's a way to have custom evaluation criteria. These are actually, I would say, kind of formulas to basically measure the outcome of the agent response. For example, comparing numbers, doing some string matching, these kind of things. Now, if you want to do more detailed analysis, like performance analysis or responsible AI metrics, you can access the data, the raw data of our of the action execution, and process it outside of the UI. Oops. So it's still working. Let's see. Reopen it. It's still working on generating our our test cases. If it takes too long, I can show you and switch to the existing tests that I have. One thing that is important that I need to mention with Testing Center is that all the tests, everything that you run in Testing Center does not count towards your credits. Running tests is free, and you can imagine that running those tests will generate a lot of calls, a lot of Einstein requests. We are not charging you for them. So that's a big difference with what you would have by using um, by exposing the agent to the end user. These are not counted towards the limits. Wow. All right. It looks like I'm very unlucky with the generation of the test. I will switch over to one of the CSV files that I was able to import earlier on. So I'll show you what it looks like. Here I have extracted the CSV. Let me zoom in a bit for everyone to read. This is one of the sample CSV files that was generated for us with the AI generated test cases. And we can take a look at this one. It has various prompts, and these are the prompts that are going to be run. Here are the expected topics that are going to be selected by the agent. In my case, in my agent, I only have one topic, so it's always going to be this one. If I were to have multiple topics, well, this would be a check that would matter a bit more. Then I think also something that is really important, that's the expected actions. You can see this is an array of actions. Sometimes when you just reject a prompt like this one, for example, this first test, you'll have no action selected. Sometimes you can see a chain of actions, like for example, for this other test of creating a personalized schedule for a given user, you're going to have to test to actually chain multiple actions. The first one will be getting the customer, and the second one will be generating the personalized schedule. There's a dependency. To generate the schedule, we need to know for which user. So that's why we have those series of expected actions that we're going to check against. Finally, the last column is the expected answer. This is what's going to be compared with the actual agent response. Again, this is not a one-to-one match. There's AI which will compare the expected response with the actual response. So it's okay if you don't have the exact word-by-word match. The agent will be smart enough to figure out that it's actually the right thing. And I did answer this question earlier on, but running tests do not consume license credits. I want to be very clear about that. Now, let's go back to our builder. Let's see, do we have our tests defined in there? Yes, it worked. So it took a bit more time, but you can see here, these are the tests that were generated by the AI for us. Generally, they're pretty good, although sometimes they do test for things that are not really accurate. One thing that I found very interesting and actually very powerful with this AI generation is that it's actually using real data. So, for example, if I look at this email here, it's not generated randomly. It's part of my contact record. So it's one of my contacts. Sorry, I forgot the name. Write that down. So it's somewhere in there. Yeah, that's the one. So it's actually picking up real records for the test, and it means that the agent is going to be able to execute the action, because otherwise, if it were taking random email addresses or random numbers for customer IDs, this wouldn't work. So now that we have the test definitions ready, you can see that the status is ready to run, but we don't have all the columns filled. That's because we haven't ran the tests. I see that some people are having trouble to generate the test. I think that's mainly due to the LLM response time. I don't have any clear solution for you. You could try to generate them with the CLI as well, but I don't know how fast it is compared to this one. It's probably also something that depends on your geo, depending where you are in the world. The answer may be faster or slower. So now that the agent has generated for us the test case, you can also, of course, download the CSV file directly from here so that you can edit like I did in Google Sheets there. And when you're ready, you can run those tests directly from Testing Center. This here, I think for about 20 tests, generally takes about 2 to 3 minutes. So I'm going to continue talking while this works. And you can see normally there are some placeholders in the columns there. What you can do is refresh this page a number of times and you'll see some progress normally with some of the screen. No, not yet. Maybe it was a bit too early. Let me try again. Some cells should start to turn green or red depending on the status of the test. So it's still running, which is fine. It'll take a bit of time. But that's going to be the first way to define those tests. Now, I want to make sure that I cover the other options. I'm going to leave this thing running in the background, and I'm going to talk about another option. So we saw right now the testing center option. We saw how we can test using CSV files and the user interface. I'm now going to show you how you can do this with the command line. And this one, I want to stress out the fact that this is a different format. This one uses YAML. But the functionality is mainly the same. The advantage of using the command line is that you can automate things. So you'll be able, for example, if you have CI, continuous integration, to run those things as part of a script. But you do have to be careful of the fact that this is a different format. So to use the CLI, I'm going to jump over to Visual Studio Code, and let me clear that. So we're going to be able to generate some tests. So we're going to be calling SF agent, and everything that is agent related is under this agent command domain. This is a plugin, that's the so-called Agentforce DX plugin. Now, if we go and hit tab there, you'll see that there are a number of options. So here we're going to be working with those tests. So I'm going to be calling test, and then we can list, for example, the tests that are currently installed with their status. Actually, no, it doesn't show the status, but at least we can see the list of tests. And we can also run tests from this. But in our case, we're going to create some tests. So if I go here and create new tests, I can specify the API name of our test. So I'm just going to call it temp2. I'm not super inspired, so I'm going to go with that. We need to provide a YAML file. I do not have one, so let me just go ahead and grab one from the documentation. There is, if I remember well, there is a command to generate this. Let me go back for a second. I think there was a way to generate a test. Let's see. Yep. There's generate command here, which will get us the test spec. Yeah, that's the one I was looking for. We can generate test spec. Let me see. I haven't run it before, to be completely transparent, but that's normally something we can use. And well, in this case, we could reuse the metadata that I've already have. So let me do that. I already have some tests defined as metadata. That's the other thing you can do to package those tests. You can also export them to XML as part of the metadata. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use this metadata file, convert it to YAML, and now we have our spec YAML file here that we can actually run and call. So I'm just going to open it so that you can see it. This is the same thing as our CSV file, except this one is defined in YAML. And again, you have also the other option to have it as part of your metadata in XML. That's exactly the same thing, but with a different format. So that's kind of unfortunate, but there are multiple formats. So if you were to use if you were to use the CLI to generate the test definition, you will have to work with YAML. Now, you can also use the CLI to run the tests. So here, what I can do is I'll finish creating my test. So I'm going to go and just call my command to create my test. So I'm going to call it temp2. I'm going to select my YAML file. So actually, let me test spec here. I'm going to select my YAML file, and this will generate a new batch of tests based on the YAML file. Now, if I were now to go back to Agentforce, I don't think that it can generate YAML file using CSV. However, once you have imported the CSV, you can actually use the metadata API to retrieve the test generation. I'll show you that later on. So anything that is deployed in the agent testing center is actually metadata. So all of these test definitions that we've created today in our testing center, and you can see them here, are actually can be retrieved as XML metadata. So this here now, this one actually is the one we just created earlier on manually with the CSV file. You can see that it has finished to pass, and it's looking pretty green. And let's see if we can see some errors. I'll see if I can. So when I mentioned that the fact that you have to have a large screen, that's precisely what I want to mention. When I want to highlight, you have to scroll a bit on the side. So the UI here is, I think, something our teams are working on. It's really far from perfect, but it's actually a start. You can also use those filters to see the ones that are failing. I'll do that so that you can see, and I can describe a bit the failure of one of those tests. Now, let's take a look at this one, for example, and see why it's classified as a failed test. Can you create a personalized schedule for me using my email? That's the first test that is running using the right topic. You can see that the expected topic matches the actual topic, so that's fairly easy. The actions are also matching. The chain of action was correctly executed. We first called the get customer from email to retrieve the customer record, the actually contact record to be precise. And then we call the generate personalized schedule action with the contact record. So this passes as well. Topic result passes, action result passes. And then I think that the problem is more in the expected response versus actual response. You can see here, I have generated a personalized schedule for you, and then the name of the user, and there's a slight deviation here in the actual agent response. There is some extra text that provides an offer to book activities. This is not part of the expected response, so this is why we're considering this one to fail. Then you can see there the other remaining columns are the optional evaluation criteria, the completeness, coherence, conciseness, and the output latency. The latency is interesting because if you have an action that requires, if you have a prompt which calls a lot of actions, you will see this number go up. So you probably want to monitor this also in a production environment to make sure that you have answers pretty quickly to your agents. Now, for each of these criteria, you have also those little convenient tooltips which also describe those criteria. It's super helpful. So now we saw that there are a number of failures in this test. We're not going to continue with this one. This was the default generated one, which is probably quite good. I mean, given that we haven't tweaked it manually, the topic pass, action pass, and response pass overall are pretty good, but we can do better than this. So I'm going to go back to Testing Center. I will get rid of this one that we generated from the AI, and we're going to focus more on the ones that I specified manually. Now, I see that I have twice the same test, and I think that's because I reused the XML of my agent action. So I'm just going to remove one of them, and we're going to see if we can trigger it from the CLI. So going back to Visual Studio Code, I shared the command to generate the test YAML file from the specification. The next thing you want to do from the CLI is actually to run the test. So, SF agent test run, and here that's the command to run the agent test. It needs two things. Actually, only one. That's the API name of our test. And then you can specify to wait for up to 10 minutes. That's the W flag. That's for waiting. Otherwise, this is an asynchronous operation, and it means that you'll have to run another command to get test results. So I'm going to do that. This will trigger my tests. And what's convenient with this test method is that it works with any of the input methods, whether you created the test with the Testing Center UI, whether you uploaded it with the CLI YAML file, or whether you've even defined it as some metadata. So it's pretty convenient because it allows you to automate things, and that's the one that will probably end up in your continuous integration. Now, I didn't add all the flags to this command By default, the response format is human friendly, but you have options to turn this into JSON, for example, and that's precisely what you would be doing in CI. You would be looking at the result in a JSON format to extract the values, the results of the tests. So let me, while this loads, I'm going to take care of answering a couple of questions. I see the chat was active and I couldn't take a look at everything. So, all right, more questions on what is being charged. Um, so again, yes, we're not charging for generating the test definitions, and we're not charging for running the tests like we're doing. These are not counted towards your limits. I want to be very clear about that. Now, moving to some other questions. Let me see. So I answered yes. You can actually generate the YAML from the XML of the metadata. You can retrieve the metadata of the XML of the tests. They are all stored in a AI evaluation definition metadata data type. And now the way you retrieve it, you can use obviously the CLI commands, but it's already running here, so I won't do it. Or you can also use, for example, the org browser, and you'll find it. It's actually at the top. You'll find it in the AI evaluation definition. So this here, if you click on one of those two icons, you'll download it in your local project from the org. So what you could do is start with the CSV file, tweak it, and then grab the metadata XML, and then from the metadata XML, you can, if you want, switch to YAML, or you can continue to edit it in the XML format. All right, I can see now the test has finished. So you can see this is the test result. This is more or less the same amount of information that you had in the testing center, except this is obviously in the terminal. So we have it's a bit less easy to read, but it's something that the machine can take a look at. So if I were to work in continuous integration, I could use some of the other flags, like changing the format and outputting the test results as JSON. And then we could be looking for example, the final test results to make a decision whether, for example, to make the CI fail, or maybe to log the historical data, the performance, and everything. You can see that the outcome is pretty good here. And that's because I tweaked the original CSV file that was generated from Testing Center to fix a number of issues. Now, if I refresh this, we're going to see also the test results being displayed in here. You can see now the status is complete, and the results that are going to be displayed here are the same results that we had in the terminal before. So we can use a mix of the CLI and a mix of this UI to look at tests. Here, for example, we can see everything is mostly looking green. There are still some issues, like, for example, this one appears to have failed. We can see why. Yeah, that's probably because we have this extra sentence to offer extra activities, and you can see there's a list of activities. That's not what we asked for. So again, you can tweak those things. There are two things to do. So when you run those tests, as a general rule, most likely you need to fix first the prompt that you're sending and the expected response definition. But sometimes you also need to tweak the topic instructions in your agent. And one of the things that I figured, for example, when I configured those tests, is that I was missing an instructions, for example, to instruct my agent to use the batch bulk issue credits when there are more than one contact. So in some cases, it was calling multiple issue credit actions instead of using the bulk one. So these are good wins you can have by watching those test results and tweaking your topic. So you're going to be working both on the action instructions, on the topic instructions, and in the test prompts. The goal is never to reach really 100%, but to get really close to this. Now, Now, obviously, each time you rerun this test suite, there's going to be some variation again because the AI is not stochastic, so it will vary a bit. Let me go back now to some questions. I see there are a few questions. Um, so there was another question about whether we should only run tests using Testing Center in development environments like D or Scratch orgs or sandboxes. Well, no, the actions here that are run in the Testing Center are isolated. Um, so yeah, that's actually no, sorry. Let me scratch that. Yes, you should only work with yes with non-production orgs, because if you have custom actions, for example, that are going to call third-party APIs, well, you better work with a test environment. Now, so yes, another question. There were some failures in the test because we did not have the exact match with the text. That's because the AI, again, we use AI and not precise match when we check for the values in our. Let's see if I can scroll. No, I can't. Sorry, I'm struggling with the small screen. Let me, not very convenient, but it's struggling sometimes to compare the expected response with the actual response. But again, this is some fuzzy matching based on AI. Now, you can make things more predictable by looking at the last thing I want to cover today. That's custom evaluation. Custom evaluation criteria. This is something that is not available in the CSV format, but it's available in YAML and in XML. And it's very powerful because it allows you to run some more predictable tests. So I'm going to share the documentation for this. When you go into the Agentforce developer guide, and obviously you can scroll down, you can take a look at the refined test cases with custom evaluation criteria. You can see those extra rules, things like string comparison and numeric comparison. So you can basically run operations like is greater than, is lower than, starts with, or contains. And there are a number of formulas that you can use. And you can see this is an example here of such a formula. I'll be honest, it's a bit hard to read in terms of syntax, but it's very flexible for operations that are calling third-party service, which may return, I would say, less predictable numbers or less predictable format. And by having this kind of test, well, you ensure that the result is always going to work. So it's very convenient. So here, a string comparison between two things. We're comparing the result of an action between the output of an action and a static value, John, here. So we take the output of an invoked action called draft generic reply email. We take the output of this and we make sure that it's in the recipient of the action, and then we check that it's John that received it. Now, I don't have any examples of this in my metadata for my test, but if I were to add some, these would be in the metadata. So let me go now to the top of the file. This is my AI evaluation definition. You have those test cases. Obviously, you have quite a few, maybe a bit less than 20. And if you could look at the structure of those test cases, right now I have a number of expectations. These are all the expectations that match the columns in Testing Center. But with custom evaluation criteria, I can add some extra expectations with those custom evaluation criteria. And I can use the whole range of formulas to fine-tune those criteria. Now, there's a whole set of operations that I mentioned. There are a number of string checks and number checks that you can run, and this is probably going to evolve over time, but it allows you to really run predictable verifications and not just AI checks when comparing strings, essentially. Yeah, that's really pretty much what I wanted to share today. There's a lot of things that are in the works. You'll see some announcements around Dreamforce because there are a number of changes that are going to arrive around Testing Center and the tools that let you generate test cases. But I can't share them just yet. So stay tuned for Dreamforce. We should even probably redo an episode about testing once we do Dreamforce. All right, let's see. Are there any other questions? Now's the time. If you have questions, I'll gladly take a look. I can see there's again once more the same question about limits and consumption. No, these tests being run and the test generation does not consume credit. So all of these things, the all the tests that are being run in Testing Center, the tests being generated do not count towards the limits, and they're not charged. Let's see any other questions that I can help with. Come on, don't be shy. Let's see. Documentation. So let me share again. I'll share it again. This link here is the link to get to the resource. I will paste it again in the chat so that you can have it. If you didn't grab it early on, this is everything you need to know to get to the trail mix, which contains the list of resources for our session today. So documentation, link to the Core Cloud sample app, and all of these things. Among those, you have the documentation to run the test with the CLI. Another quick thing that I want to share, which is not really directly related to Testing Center, is there's a really cool command that you'll probably find very useful in your day-to-day operations. That's part of the agent commands. That's the ability to run SF agent activate or agent deactivate. And there's a convenient tool here which lets you select your agent. Of course, you can already enter this manually. It's way faster than going into the agent builder user interface and clicking around. So when you're making changes to your actions, when you're tweaking topics and instructions, you have to, of course, disable your agent, and it's actually faster to do it from the command line. All right, let's see other questions. And yes, I want to. Yeah, let me go over the one thing that I did not cover. I almost forgot about this. The APIs. I mentioned earlier on that there was also the ability to call the testing API. I did not show that just yet, but let me show it very quickly. So I've made an update to our favorite Salesforce Platform APIs collection in Postman. For those of you who don't know it, I will need to add it to the trail mix. I don't think I forgot to add it there, but this is a collection of API requests that you can call on the Salesforce Platform APIs. And among those, there is a set of new requests here, which lets you run agent test, get the status on some ongoing test, and also see the test results. That's also another way to manage your tests. I'll be honest, I think the Salesforce CLI is pretty convenient to do this, but if you were integrating your tests in some third-party application, then you can consider using those API requests. So let me quickly show how this works. I will just first start to authenticate with my org, and that's good. All right, I have my authentication going. I will run now my agent test. This is you have to configure obviously the name of your test here. This is the test name, the API name for the test. It's the same that matches your metadata XML. It's also the API name from that you can see in the Testing Center. So when you click send on this one, AI evaluation runs. It's gonna trigger the test. Now you don't have the result just yet, obviously, but you have a test job ID. And then you can call the second query here, the second request here to get the test status. You have to fill in here this field under path variables with the ID of your test run that you just triggered. You'll then send test, and then you'll see that your test is in progress. You can do this a number of times to pull for the status of your test. And finally, when the test is complete, you can call this last operation, which also needs the run ID. So I'll already paste it there. And you can run it once the test is complete. So let me just first make sure the test is complete. So I'll run again this one, still in progress. And by the way, you can also see that this is actually acting or impacting the testing center. So if we were to go in my test here, we would see that it's actually in progress and some actions are still pending. So it's still in progress. Now, if I go back to Postman, I can continue to hit my polling on the status of my test. Let's see, maybe a minute more. All right, let's wait a bit more. Let's see. Come on. Well, at some point it will finish. You can actually try to get the test results before the test run is finished. This will get you partial test results, and you'll see that there is also a status field in the test result. So you can also see incomplete test results. Let me do that so that we don't wait for too long. You're going to see the first incomplete test results. You can see that it's still in progress, but we already have some test data here with our test case results. Some of them are finished, some of them are still pending, I guess, if you scroll down. So that's precisely what you could consume with continuous integration or with something else. This is exactly the same data that you can get with the Salesforce CLI commands in JSON format, by the way. Let me just run it one more time. There we go. Now the status is complete. And if I were again to call my get test results, we'll see the full test results. There we go with status complete and all of the results. And if I were also to go back in Testing Center, I will see that my test is now complete and you can see the passing percentage. Now, what's interesting, you may have noticed that this was 100% before and it's no longer 100%. So there's some slight variation. And when you do this at scale, basically you don't want to match for a certain number. You don't want to reach 100%. You want to reach a number that is pretty close. And by having more tests, you reduce the variability of the rates. So that's something you want to do. More questions. I mentioned earlier on in the beginning that you could use knowledge to generate tests. Obviously, you would need also data cloud because this would be doing working with RAG. So you would need to have data cloud as part of this. Same thing for using conversation history. Conversation history is actually stored in data cloud. So if you don't have data cloud, you can still run tests, but you cannot use the conversation history on the knowledge articles there because you don't have access to this information. Do we have the SF agent activate command in Postman too? I don't believe it's available there, probably because it's not documented. It'll be actually a good thing to investigate. I'm not aware of it. It's metadata, so perhaps in the metadata definition of agents you have it. So actually, let me check that. The agents are packaged as a metadata type. This is actually called a GenAI Planner bundle, and this is this is our agent definition here. But no, it doesn't contain the activation status of the agent. So I don't think you can do it from, at least not from metadata. I would have to check if there is an API method to activate or deactivate it. But I'm pretty sure what the CLI command does is actually call an API to activate or deactivate the agent. So it likely exists. It may not be documented, and that's all. All right. Cool. Well, that's great. I think I answered most questions. Thank you all so much for joining. We'll be back in about a month. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and give us a like. The entire recording of this session will be available shortly. Actually, and I was saying there was maybe a chance that we don't have another code live next month because that's going to be Dreamforce. But that's we'll see. Thank you so much again for joining, and I hope you've learned something today. And yeah, have a good rest of your day. Bye, everyone.